Okay, so as I already said, today we'll talk about how to assess children's level of knowledge. I would like to cover two main reasons to assess. First one is for the educator to know how to further the learning process and upgrade our activities to foster kids' improvement. And the second one, and equally important, is to foster children's ability to self-evaluate their knowledge. Because if they can self-evaluate their knowledge, they own it. Not evaluating for the sake of the grading, but for the sake of the knowledge. So the idea of evaluating is to foster children's growth, because if we only hand out grades, then the focus is on teachers' judgment on children's knowledge, which we do not want, of course. And in real life, to be honest, our own growth should matter and not what other people's judgment to our knowledge is. So what we would like to pass on with evaluating and assessment is the growth and the self-confidence in children. So prior to talk about any assessment, we first need to know what we're assessing, and we need to have our goals in our mind, mainly the big picture. To bring children to use the language is our main big aim, our beacon, okay, our guideline. And in the curriculum, this final goal is even wider and more demanding, as I will point out, you'll see. But first, what we need to see is what the law expects from us so we can tailor our evaluation to make the bureaucracy serve us and not that we are the slaves of the bureaucracy, okay? So we have already established what the use of language means. And in our previous meeting, if you remember, and if we just recall, the use of language is the ability that you communicate, and you can communicate only if you understand, you correctly interpret what you understood, and then you pass the message on either in spoken words or in written, and that you know how to address audience either through the paper, through the text, or in real life with audiences in different contexts, okay? And if we look at the curriculum, what our general objectives are, it's a Slovenian curriculum for English language, we see that the hopes of what to achieve in the first grade are rather high and unrealistic, because kids' development stage at the age of 6 and 7 cannot comprehend half of what is written here. But as I said before, we can, if we know how, set the groundwork to prepare children to achieve all what is written here in higher grades. So I believe that the objectives that are written here are that guideline, that beacon, that our final aim in language learning, with the view of where we want to bring our students in the long run. So that is what I believe they wanted to convey here. Regarding cultural and linguistic diversity, I would say that we can already address this by presenting the English language, even in the first grade, differently as the class teachers say, like, we write number 7 this way, so you at English language should write the number 7 the same way. To present the cultural differences while doing it, this is one way how we can do it. You can say, yes, you have been taught how to write number 7 this way, but you know, English people write it differently. The same goes with some of the letters, like I, they write it differently. So it's not big a deal, but you can start with serving this cultural and linguistic diversity by presenting how in English language we write. So it is the typography of the numbers and the letters. And the other difference, what you can do is also the alphabet sound and letter system. So English language has lots of sounds that are different from Slovene, and Slovene doesn't have them. So children can pay attention to these differences. It does not mean that you need to sit down and discuss about it, but just that they notice it, okay? Receptive, creative, interactive mediation skills. This is what we really foster with our communicative teaching, and we will come to that later. But the one thing here, key lifelong learning skills, is something that I believe can be achieved only if we teachers live them. Right, so what they are, I'm going to present them in sets, and we're going to discuss just those that you can apply during your teaching, but not like sitting down and discussing about them, but practicing them. So first set is cognitive and thinking skills. And critical thinking is, for example, when you hear some new piece of information about new way of teaching, ask yourself, do you learn about that piece of information? Do you think about it? How this new piece of information could benefit your teaching practice, or you discard it because you believe everything is okay with the way you teach. That problem solving is the result, when the result of the way you teach doesn't show the way you would want to. Like in high grades, children get bad grades, or in lower grades, they do not participate in the activities. Do you evaluate your teaching practice? Do you solve the problem? Do you ask yourself, why doesn't it work? Or you back off and defend, this is how we've done so far, so children need to change in order to enjoy the activities. With creativity and innovation, do you change your teaching practice every year in order to improve it? Do you adapt to the every year's new situations, or do you stick to the things that you are familiar with? That would be creativity and innovation. Then adaptability and flexibility. I think this one is really important because today's lifestyle is changing really, really, really fast. And kids' skills are not what they used to be, and they come to schools less socially developed as previous generations came. But on the other hand, some of their other abilities are much more developed, like computer literacy. So do you persist on teaching as it was practiced 20 years ago? Or you just change course books, but still follow the same aims by teaching academic skills? Or do you adapt and try to catch up on the lost skills that children come to school with, and then you later on start with the academic knowledge? The information literacy is also very important. I will give here the same example as I did before. Do you search for new teaching approaches? Do you learn about them in depth? I stress out here in depth, because a lot of times I hear, oh, I've heard that, let's move on. It's like children, oh, we've done this activity, let's find another one. They do not go and delve deeper to see deeper meaning in certain activities. What about you? How do you approach new things that you hear about them? Do you evaluate them? Do you use them? Do you change them? Do you test them? Or do you stick to old tested ones? Then the next set of things is also very important, because our final aim is communication. And we know that if we want to communicate effectively, social skills are of paramount importance. And effective communication means that, let's say that I would like you to tell me how your lesson went today. And what you need to do is give me the exact happening in 2 sentences. That would mean that you can convey the message effectively. Can you do that? Or do you go and beat about the bush and explain, and you do ums and uhs before you express yourself? And by saying you, I do not address you exactly, but general you people. So please do not take anything that I say here personally. Then we have collaboration and teamwork. Our next session is going to be about group work, but ask yourself, how do you work? Do you collaborate with your colleagues? Do you have teams to work on? Do you accept, if you have a teamwork, do you accept your colleagues' opinion on teaching, even if it is not the one you want to hear? Can you defend your way of teaching by professionally explaining what the benefits of what your teaching practice brings to your learners? Or are you offended when somebody gives you such a critic? Because this is also what we would like with group work to teach our children and our pupils. And if you cannot own the critic, then you cannot pass it on, at least not authentically. Then the way I see intercultural competence is, ask yourself, are you biased if a child or a parent cannot address you in your mother tongue, even though they live in the land of your mother tongue? What about how they come up dressed, their dress code? Do you feel biased? That is the question you should ask yourself before you start teaching about other cultures. And emotional intelligence is, in my opinion, very closely related with teamwork and collaboration, because when you hear a critic against your teaching, do you snap and attack, or do you elaborate on what was said and defend your case with the learning outcome your teaching practice brings to your learners? The next set of skills is also important, but not so much regarding our classroom practice. So you can read that, but I will not elaborate on them. And I will also not elaborate to the last two ones that are considered to be the lifelong learning skills. And those skills that are presented here are those with which, if you know them, you can self-control your learning practice, and they can enable your self-regulation. And the question through all this explanation and my opinion on them is, can you teach lifelong skills in your classroom? You can, by using those skills in your everyday life, because then certain things come natural to you, and then you can pass on real lifelong learning skills. So if you see, this is quite elaborative discussion, but it is expected that we start to foster this in the first grade as well. Now let's go to more concrete objectives. As you can see, we only have 4 in our curriculum. Listening and auditory comprehension is well practiced when you use English as a means of communication in the classroom. That are social skills like voice, eye contact, patience, emotional and body awareness. And the paramount importance here is to use those skills to foster comprehension. So that's why we are so focused on working on social skills with our kids, because those enable understanding, not so much memorizing the words. And you can do that if you own those social skills, use them while you constantly speak English in your classroom. Okay, and do you speak English in the classroom all the time, or is it just from time to time and then you switch to Slovene? So if you would like to teach them listening and auditory comprehension, you really need to start speaking in English all the time. Spoken communication and interaction is not repeating memorized vocabulary, songs, dialogues, rhymes, because just repeating them, there is no interaction in them. Just telling, like while pressing the button and speaking on and on and on, does not evoke interaction with the speaker. And the reaction with the speaker and the interaction with the speaker is communication. Otherwise, it is not communication. Mediation, we're going to come to that just in a wee bit later. But I would like to talk about the pre-literacy skills, because these, I believe, can also bring quite a lot of confusion when talking about communication. To understand a spoken language, one must first learn to read the body language, to interpret facial expressions, to decipher the rhythm and intonation of speech. Only then does that person understand the words and connect the words to the meaning. So pre-literacy is not just learning to read the letters, okay?
So pre-literacy is also knowing how to read body language, tone of our voice, and to read our gesticulation. And with young learners, when we tell them a story by using picture books, we use body language to support our speaking. However, children, when they observe us narrating, they are showered with words they do not understand. And here, illustrations come in play. So, pre-literacy is therefore the ability to know how to read illustrations, especially
complex illustrations, which most frequently appear in picture books. That's why we also use picture books in our communicative teaching, because complex illustrations, while we're speaking and children are listening to our voice, those illustrations, complex illustrations, they have a lot in common with the written text. They have introduction, they have connections, the words among themselves that are illustrated. So therefore, when we teach children what the strategy, how to read illustration is, it helps them later to read and understand the text. And in my opinion, reading the illustration is also a pre-literacy skill, which we can also address in the first grade. So as I said, it is not repetition and learn by heart and address the topic divided themes. And it is also, as you see here in red, underlined, it is also part of the curriculum. So that's why I don't know why all the course books are topic related and they talk about numbers first, then about the weather, then about the food, and they are well accepted, but in the curriculum it is strictly written that we should avoid isolated or standalone topics. So make your own opinion on that. Okay, curriculum suggests children should practice phonological awareness, strategies for listening, understanding frequently used vocabulary, recognizing basic communication, become familiar with authentic text, and here I'll add that super simple songs and text which only have, I don't know, 2 or 3 lines and a picture are okay if you use them as an extra activity, but that is not the real life situation. So maybe use them sometimes, but go to the real life situation texts, which are picture books, real poems, and stuff like that. And now we come to mediation, which I said I'm going to address later. This part here I find really, really disturbing, the way it is put in the curriculum, because I see mediation fostering language learning when children respond to the instructions through verbal or non-verbal reactions, demonstrating the meaning for others, not that they translate what the teacher says in Slovene, because that is contradictory to understanding. Because if you translate, then children who do not understand what the teacher says will stop listening to the teacher and they will just wait for the translation. So in my opinion, this is not okay. I would prefer to channel pupils to observe what other pupils are doing, see their responses to teachers' instruction and copy them. And this way they connect the saying and the action with the meaning. And this way they learn to understand. Right, assessment. Here it says that the educators monitor the language, but that does not mean that you teach the language, okay? And I would stress out that teaching vocabulary without the meaning, without passing the message on, is learning the language. That's why I many times stress out, do not teach vocabulary isolated from the meaning, because that is abstract to them and children just learn by heart, memorize it, and then forget about it. Content related objectives, to my interpretation, is, for instance, correct naming of the weather. So when you talk about today and you look through the window, they say it's windy, it's cloudy, that is content-related objectives. And here you also see that the curriculum says that you need to give in-depth feedback, and that is during the learning process. We will address this through the activities later on when we come to that. And when you grade and you say, okay, you get 3, that is not an in-depth feedback. So an in-depth feedback is asking questions and about what children did, and children elaborate on what they did. That would be, as we will see with the activities that we come to them. If you have special needs students in your class and they do not want either to cooperate yet, or they do not speak yet, they are in their silent period, you can easily write in the report that the child is not yet ready for the evaluation and you do not grade them. When we do the assessment, and you will see later at the activities, it is done with the teacher, so the teacher does it and the student. We have different ways how to address
evaluation or assessment.
And we will go through all that when we do the exact activities we did in the introductory routine. Evaluation is done not every time, or at least not every time with all the students during the learning process, but it is done during the learning process so that children can see where they are. And when you get the response from them, if it is non-verbal, it is accepted. And as you see, the last one, dramatizing, singing, participating in simple dialogue, this is exactly what we have in our introductory routine. There in the curriculum is also suggested what types of activities you can use for listening comprehension. The first one here, I think it could be aligned with the craft activities, like the ones Fiona showed us. It is exactly, give the instructions what to do in simple ways, and children need to make a product. Multiple choice task with images or objects. This one is really delicate because it can be interpreted in different ways. It is often when you evaluate or when you grade, you give, for instance, 3 pictures. One is an apple, then is a pear, then is a plum. And you simply say an apple, and children circle an apple. That is, in my opinion, not a communicative way of doing it. The communicative way of doing it is when the question serves the communication in the manner that our national examination test, NPZ, evaluates listening comprehension. And I think you're familiar with it. So the speaker, the teacher, narrates the story, and the children need to recognize in the image that is a complex one, what the message of that narration is. That would be, and you have 3 different images, and then the child, while understanding that narration, circles that image. I would say this would be a good way to address listening comprehension, even in the 1st grade. And in the spoken communication expression, there are different ways how you can do it, and most of them we have already done in the introductory routine, and some we're going to do with the project work. And now we'll address theory with practical activities.